different platform protocols. And this is the outline of our presentations. We firstly will introduce the update of the protocols, and also replies to the criteria. And next slide, please. And our draft was first present in the IETF 90s, which was define the REST style protocols. And secondly, we present the draft in Hawaii, which is the we made a code demos. And next slide, please. And in the new updates from 0.1, we add implementation considerations, which is firstly is the control sessions. As the figure shows, we use the controller as a client and the MA as a server. In this by these considerations, we thought that it was much easier to the client can send the instructions to the MAs instantly. And secondly, is the MA the client can know the activation status from the MAs anytime. So by these structures, there won't be MA polling. There won't be considerations of the MA polling. So in the reporting sections, we use the MA as a client and the collector as a server, which means the MA can send the report instantly and more efficiently. And the third one is we are considering to the advantages of the REST, because the REST is widely used and there won't be no requirements to the client, and it can almost be acceptable by all the browsers and applications. And the second part is we add descriptions for the criteria, which is introduced in the next slide, please. And in the criteria, we are almost, we think we can meet all the requirements, and especially I have to mention is the is must 3 is the security. We use the credential security part is by the HTTPS. And next slide, please. And in I think I don't have to mention all the part. It's okay.
Get back, please. Go back previously. So the first two bullets, what you mean is actually that the criteria is met and the description is or the explanation is in section 1.4.1, 4.2 in your internet drafts. That's what you mean, right?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Now the and the versionable is we considering of using the JSON, which can be extended by adding more information models. And we also hope that that this can be added in the information model draft as more specific in the information model as well.
So this means that actually you need to propose extensions to the information model. There's extendability criteria, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you need to be here obviously more concrete about what needs to be added to the information model. So basically, that's comments for the information model internet graph that you need to know. Okay. So that's what I didn't understand.
Barbara Stark. So there was a requirement that it be extensible, the
Right.
protocol, and I think that's just describing how, if there were a need for extension, this is how it would be done. Therefore, it is extensible.
Plus extensions in the information model. What is the hope in the brackets?
It's simply a statement that it can be extended.
Okay. Okay.
I think more detail can be added. I know I know the proposals. I think more detail can be added soon. Next slide, please. And I guess next slide, please. And in the reporting protocols and in the MAS one also we mentioned it in the section 5.1, and the MAS 2 is also the credential part is by HTTPS, and the third part is also we use JSON to be added. I think more detail can be added soon. Next slide, please. And we use this as by the TCPs, and also we have now have the open source program in the GitHub. And next slide, please. And in the future work, we are now considering to add more data models and such as young models, and also the RESTconf to be added in our implementations. And also we are proposing to propose this draft as protocol solutions. So, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question actually. Did you read the other proposal?
Yes.
Where do you see like the principal differences?
I think the principal difference is mainly in the architectures. Okay, sorry. Oh yeah, that was long. And I think the difference is in the implementation of the control protocols. To my views, is the control protocols in. Can you return to the I guess it's third page? Yes, yes, with the figures. I think the difference is in the control protocols that we are using the we're using the controllers as a client and MA as a service as a server, and I suppose that other draft is different in this part. They implement the controller as a server and the client as MAs, so it's different. I think the advantages of our control protocol I just mentioned is it can be more instance, and it can do the status check as soon as possible. It can get feedback.
Marcelo, so can you explain me how this works through NATs?
I'm sorry?
Can you explain me how this works through NATs?
Through NATs?
NATs, yes.
Traversal.
This is top on the clause of this document. So I think there are many NAT traversal protocol IETF already defined it. For example, SE protocol and other things. We can use that to do the NAT traversal.
So maybe one thing to add to the protocol document is a short section that explains how it works with NET and what protocols, what IETF protocols need to be used in order to allow for NET traversal.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Marcelo again. No. So what's the benefit of this? Because I understand the downside, right? If you need to use NAT traversal techniques, right? The protocol is clearly much more complex, right? So why are you doing this? What's the motivation for actually doing this way, other than being different? I think the benefit is that we don't need MA to call the controller. The controller can, when the controller get a new task, it can send the command directly to the MA. It doesn't need the MA to periodically call the controller. That will put a lot of traffic in the network.
The controller can initiate the sessions at the time it wants.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. The thing is, you don't really need I mean, if you're going to use some sort of NAT traversal technique, the NAT traversal technique always relies on the client open a hole first, because that's the way it works, right? So basically, at the end of the day, you always need the client to start the communication, and then eventually, once you have the communication channel working, right, you can allow the controller to push information to the main, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, always is the client who starts the communication, right?
Yeah.
Opens the channel, and
Right.
then the communication flows, and then you follow the information model that is basically that the controller sends instructions, right?
Yes.
So at the end of the day, always is the client who starts the communication. That's the only way it works.
Yes.
Jürgen Schönwelder. I'm channeling a question from Trevor. It's about the slide on next steps. You probably want to go to the slide next steps. And he asked, what does adding information mode mean? And also, what does adding Yang and RESTCOM mean?
By now, we implement the configurations only by XML and REST. So I think this is not. I think this is very simple, and the header was short. But I think that by using the REST conf, it can contain more informations, and it can be well formed. So, and also it can be more acceptable by the working groups.
Right. So I'm kind of getting the feeling that whatever of the two protocol proposals we go, and we'll certainly continue to discuss, actually writing a Yang data model would be useful for both. Okay, so I believe if you want to get back to the NAT traversal discussion and the client initiation, please.
Okay, just a response to Marcelo's comments. I think our proposal has some benefits. I'm Da-Tong Liu. Yeah. So as Vic just mentioned, we in our proposal, the MA doesn't necessary to periodically requires the controller to send the test task. So that's the major benefit. I think that benefit will save a lot of traffic in the network. So that's very important aspect of our proposal.
Yeah, Mathis. I think that all the discussion on NATs and such is important. Other than tolerant of NATs, I don't think NATs are part of the architecture. And what that means is the protocol can't presuppose which end has to do the initiation. There has to be mechanisms to do it both ways, but it can't be an architectural property of the protocol that it always starts in a certain way. Or there's going to be some corner cases that it doesn't work for.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, Marcelo, again, I agree with Matt, but the thing is, I think it's fair to assume that NATs are pervasive and like a very large amount of probes will be behind NATs. Right? I mean, in any of the current deployments that you see, right? I mean, there's the large majority of the probes that are behind NATs. Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I understand it cannot be part of the architecture, but heavily optimizing for a very common case seems reasonable to me.
So I'd like to make an observation here. We really did not include in the decision criteria anything about this, not as a mandatory, not as an optimal. We have an optimal criteria. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the question was, that was in the criteria was simply, do you have anything other than the basic, you know, stun, turn, ice that
Right.
you would make use of? So there was a question that that was.
Right. So I don't believe that it's a kind of if we need to optimize or it would be good to optimize for a certain type of interactions, and we need to discuss this as part of the criteria discussion. I believe that it's kind of not the right way to conduct the discussion here. And anyway, probably at this point in time, we would like also to hear the other presentation and kind of limit us to clarification questions about what we heard about this proposal, because then we have a discussion about the protocol itself and then discuss the proposals. But people are already standing in the line. So I'm taking responsibility for not structuring the discussion, please.
Also, we are hoping to gather more comments by the panelists, of course.
Hi, Vaibhav Vajpayee, Jakob University Brain. So your last slide has me confused. First of all, now you're proposing to use a Yang data model, and given that you have JSON instances within your document, if you plan to go with the Yang data model, a JSON instance will automatically fall out of the data model, right? Which we are proposing in our draft anyway. And going forward, if you propose RESTCon, the protocol primitives that you have in the document will again be dictated by RESTCon. So in your next draft version, once you propose using both of them, how much will be left out in your draft is my question.
I think this is just a considerations. I think if it works, we will add to the next versions.
So channeling Trevor again, he was asking basically the same question. So if you do Yang data models and RESTCon, how is that different at the end from other proposals?
Okay, so
that was also my first question.
Yeah. Okay, I think we'll just we'll consider about it, and I think this is also the same questions too. So we'll consider about it. We'll make a considerable update.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Jabber? Okay, let's get to the second presentation.
Thank you.
The second proposal. Thank you very much. The second proposal, and please, if somebody can watch Jürgen's computer, can watch the Jabber in the meantime while Jürgen is presenting.
Yeah, hello. This is an update of the data model, and just to be very clear about this from the very beginning, the proposal here is not to do any new protocol. So it's not a protocol proposal, it's a proposal to do a data model and to reuse protocols that are defined somewhere else.
Okay. You will tell us what protocol you can reuse, yes? Or you will tell us what protocol you can use with Yang, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So slide 2, please. So changes, we made alignments to the changes to the information model, and I just took a note that we apparently missed one thing, so that's an ongoing process. We started calling what the information model calls an MA-SCED task object. We called it an action because we found it easier to name it differently, but it's conceptually the same. So the idea is that a schedule kicks off a number of actions in order to distinguish them from tasks that are other objects in the data model. And so having a different term was just more convenient for us. Yeah, we improved the status objects. We communicated that back. Got meanwhile changed in the information model. We have XML and JSON examples included in the document to give an idea how it looks like if you write a concrete configuration. That's probably something to take out at some point in time again. probably would have been more useful to include an example how you do REST style interactions based on the data model. So I figured this out and I sent something to the list a couple of days ago to have at least an example. And I didn't bother putting that on the slides. If you want to see it, please go to the mailing list archive and pick up the example. Next slide. Implementation status. We have started a project to implement what essentially is the information model and the data model. So what it boils down to is we're writing a daemon that's reading the XML serialization of the data model and is kicking off. So it understands the schedule, is kicking off tasks that run as separate processes, and we organize the information flow between them. So the idea is to have essentially a daemon that's consistent with the information model and the data modeling doing the work. We haven't worked on the protocol front end to actually modify the configuration because we thought we better wait until there's a decision on which direction to go. Yeah. But it's the core execution engine is being worked on. It's currently still in our own private GitLab repository, so we might have to move it to a public GitLab repository. We are trying to pay attention to make it as simple as possible for measurement tasks, that they don't have to bother about any buffering and locking issues. That's something that the working group likes to stay away from. We have at the interim meeting quite some discussions about it because there are queues between scheduled tasks and somehow you have to make sure that everything is organized. Next slide. Protocol selection, yeah, I posted an example to the mailing list. I said it earlier. I wrote a response to the protocol evaluation criteria, which is roughly, it's very similar to the other because they're both REST kind of protocols, so the differences are minor if you look at the criteria. The configuration protocol, the idea is to use RESTConf, which is has passed the first working group last call, but we'll have another one, I'm pretty sure, in the netconf working group. And the netconf working group has also worked on the call home mechanism, which allows you to initiate the connections from the MA through a firewall back into the controller. Writing the configuration model, data model is relatively straightforward. And I think we just have to synchronize and make sure that it's implementable and it's consistent with the information model and so forth. What is a little bit less clear is the reporting part, because it's important to look into optimizations here. So the information model, if you translate it one-to-one, is extremely verbose because it echoes lots of configuration information back with the report, which is important so you can actually get the data and understand how it was generated, but you really don't want to echo that data constantly. So you want to have ways of suppressing data that you don't have to repeat all the time. And so I think there's really a little bit more work and thinking to be done to come up with something that is giving us reasonably small footprints on the wire such that we don't send huge amounts of data to collectors. So my proposal here is actually to split that into different pieces. At the moment, it's all in one data model. It might make sense to actually split that into two data models, also to have flexibility and probably use only the control protocol, but have a different reporting mechanism or whatever, or to evolve them just in different ways as we get experience. Next slide. Yeah, so that's the next step. So if the protocol selection leads to Yang RESTConf, well, then we have to continue work on this. And, I'm happy that Trevor sees it the same way. I think we should keep the information model around until we are reasonable, sure we can actually write data models that are consistent. We can make sure that at the end we ship something where stuff lines up and doesn't get out of sync. My presentation questions. Okay, so probably what we need is a little RESTConf tutorial. So RESTConf, so if you use RESTConf, the RESTConf server is on the MA. And so the traditional way of talking to a RESTConf server is you initiate the connection pretty much like you do today from the outside to the inside. However, if there's a NAT in between, then that doesn't work. And there's an extension that's called call home, which essentially provides a mechanism to initiate the TCP connection from the inside to the outside. But then you reverse the roles, you run TLS over it, and then you talk essentially in the same way to the device. So it's just a different way of setting up the TCP connection. And the call home document, there's another document that defines how that is configured. And so you have a data model that says, that tells where you should connect to, and it has a bunch of interesting features because it allows you to configure multiple endpoints that are cycled through, so you can have replicated servers, and it automatically going through the list, trying to connect them in a cycle. You have timers about how frequently to connect, how long you leave a connection lingering before you tear it down. It has, I think there was another parameter. So it is pretty decently worked out how the whole thing works. It's done in NetConf working group. And some of the pointers point to those documents. And the idea is to just reuse that rather than creating something on our own.
One other quick comment. This is Jason Weil, personal comment. So the NAT traversal is one issue for the v6 world. IPv6 firewall for another issue. But if it's both covered in that REST toolkit, then that's useful.
Any other questions to Jürgen? Any other discussions about the protocol? Okay, what I believe needs to be done is we need updates. Actually, we need an update to the REST style proposal, weekly use proposal. We need a short document about using RESTConf and YANG as the Lmap protocol. And actually, I'm asking now both. Is it possible to have those two show up in the next month? Let's say until the end of April.
We can write it this week. So
this week is before the end of April, so it's okay. It's accepted.
Yeah.
Okay. From the other team, can you update the REST proposal until in 1 month? Okay, good. Thank you.
I guess, Barbara Stark, my question would be, so, well, I guess maybe you'll explain what your path forward. I was just kind of curious as to, is there a sense that we really still need to continue for a long time having two proposals, or when will we make a decision?
No, actually my take was that we have the two proposals by the end of April, the latest. Sooner is better. We discuss those on the list, and actually we'll start a thread about differences, and another thread about the possibilities of merging the two proposals. And we hold an interim meeting sometime mid-May, the latest, to make a decision, and actually have soon after the draft Lmap protocol that will start to work us on the path of victory. Yes.
Hi, Dan. Sav Vajpayee, University Bremen. So given that we did not hear about any other proposals on the data modeling side, and people seem to be happy with the YANG data model document, so perhaps we should ask for working group adoption on this document.
It's a very good point. Opinions?
Yes, so Hui Deng, I'm wondering whether we have implementation before we judgment if you would like hold the midterm meeting, right?
Right. So as I understand, the first proposal is already implemented, and I don't know about if you have anything of using RESTconf as a reporting and configuration protocol. Do you have anything, Jürgen, in works?
So as I said, we have code that's implementing the data model and the information model.
Yeah.
We don't have code for the protocol because we are waiting for the decision before we go into that direction.
Well, you know that you can accelerate a decision by showing that your code works.
The question was, I think the question that Wiper raised was whether we should ask for adoption of the data model. Now, I probably biased.
No, that's a separate question.
Yeah, but I also heard from the other presentation that they said they wanted to adopt Yang.
So I guess that again, separate discussion. Okay, let's take that one first. So this is the question first. Let's get the hum. We didn't come for a long time this one. So the questions that I will be asking is whether people feel good with adopting the Yang data model as the Lmap data model. Is the question clear? No. Okay. No. That's the question. So if you agree that we should adopt Yang data model, the Yang data model as a data model for Lmap, please come now. If you have concerns or strongly disagree, and we should not adopt it, as we should not adopt Yang as Lmap data model, please come now. Okay? Strong consensus for adopting Yang data model. We'll take this to the list to see if there is any strong opinion on the list, but we'll give like 1 week for people to protest. And we hear nothing on the list, then we'll adopt the next version of the Yang data model will be draft Lmap data model. Okay, the other issue is it would be good that by the time when we're going to make a decision, we could have some kind of working code to show. And we can look into arranging for the WebEx to support the demo. I think that we'll use WebEx for our conferencing tool. Yes.
So for which decision? For the protocol decision, you want to have running code of what?
Running code of configuring probes, running code of reporting, example of reporting. Of course, there will be example, not full functionality, but a subset. That's how it works. That's how I start a session. That's how I turn on a schedule. That's how my task starts. These are some examples of data that are being reported to the controller by task 1, by task 2.
Okay.
So if this would be possible to be shown by mid-May when we are targeting the interim, that would be extremely useful and probably would help the respective proposal. Okay. Any other comments on the protocols? Good. We have now 2 items that are actually we start of kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So basically we have 2 out of non-charted items, and they are quite interesting. One of them is about use cases for collaborative Lmap. It's not new. The other one is actually a new it's a liaison from the IEEE, but basically proposing some possible new work. So let's entertain those 2. Okay, Lingley. Hello. Is there a preso? How you present? Okay. But you have a presentation? Okay, if you have it, please bring it and we'll upload later. My Chinese is improving back up.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rachel Huang from Huawei, and Lily cannot attend this meeting, so I'll present this collaborative Lmap on behalf of her. On behalf of her. Okay. Yes. This is outline of this presentation. Okay. Next, please. The motivations from China. Why we need the collaborative Lmap. As we know that China is a very big country. It has 31 provinces and more than 3 regions, which result in a very complex hierarchical network deployment. And there are 3 ISP giants. They are China Mobile, China Telecom, China Unicom. Each of them manages a nationwide network. So if the ISPs or the regulator want to know the whole picture of their nationwide network, they had to get information from the probes of each region of every provinces. That may need more than 900 probes. Totally. Okay. Actually, also there are some third-party companies like China Cash, China Net Center, also providing nationwide network information reports. And MIT, as the official organization of China, has been issuing the report of broadband speed state every quarter for 2 years. However, these reports are only, especially the reports from third-party companies, are from their dedicated probes deployed in the network. They are not, they cannot truly affect the real network status. And it would be prohibitive for MIT to deploy their own dedicated probes because there are so many in the whole area of China. So we have some requirements to. So that's the motivations we want to have a collaborative Lmap. Yes, please. What is collaborative Lmap? From the narrow view, it refers to the scenarios where multiple different measurement systems collaborate together to perform large-scale performance measurement. And from the broad view, from the Lmap view, Lmap practice that involves at least communication or coordinations between multiple controllers or collectors. Currently, this part of work is not chartered, not in the current charter of Lmap, because Lmap is currently assume only one single controller. So that's a basic work I wanted to propose in here. Next, please. No, too fast. Yeah. Oh, so this one. Yeah, this one. This is the use cases we listed in the documents. So why collaborative is needed? We have 4 use cases. From the single ISPs, they may need to address some scalability problems. Like they have multiple subdomains for very large ISP. So they may need to collaborate together, collaborate inside their organizations, companies. And from a regulator, they want to address some CapEx issues because they don't want to deploy their dedicated probes. They want to reuse this existing Lmap systems like ISPs already have deployed. And for ICPs, they may have some similar issues as a regulator because they also want to address some CapEx issues. And from end users, they may a collaborative Lmap may have some benefits for end user to do some troubleshooting in segmented access environment, which may be covered by different ISPs. So they can use collaborative Lmap to do some troubleshooting from end to end. Okay, next, please. So from these use cases and motivations, we got a conclusion that Lmap may need to do some extension for collaboration between domains. Basically, we have 4 requirements listed here. Once that we may need some mechanism for task coordination. A second, we may have some requirements for mechanism to let the results produced in one single Lmap system to be aggregated together. And some security issues. We may need some mechanisms for authentication and authorization for collaborative measurement tasks. And we don't want current Lmap protocols or information model or architecture to be changed too much. We don't need such big changes. Minor changes are preferred. So next, please. So this is basically what kind of extensions we need Lmap to do. So this one is actually described in the previous slides. So next, please. So the important thing I want to do here is that we want to start a discussion. So the working group think the Lmap plans to have this use cases in the future or not. Okay. Yeah, almost.
Henning Schwarzmann.
you seem to be, if I understood you correctly, discussing two somewhat different scenarios, namely, at least, not just for different ISPs and all that, but you go, namely, what I might call a real-time distribution control, where some master controller in Beijing tells the 300 provinces today is ping day, and they all go do their ping test individually. The second one, which I suspect can be solved in essentially a hierarchical type of model where province has essentially a big virtual measurement agent that in turn distributes commands down hierarchically as necessary. The second one, which seems more likely, particularly more from a regulatory perspective or more public disclosure perspective, the interaction is much more long-term. Namely, in a sense, data is collected independently on a relatively stable set of parameters, is collated into a national or regional data set, etc. So there isn't really much protocol interaction. It's much more of a data gathering interaction. How do I aggregate data so that I don't have to manually cut and paste spreadsheets type of thing. And so I'm wondering if you're more concerned about the real time, as in happens right now, today, or are you concerned about gathering and collecting, collating data in a useful way? You seem to have very different problems. Both might be interesting, but they seem different.
Yeah, actually, the motivation from the real time, but maybe we can consider in the future. I don't know.
So what would you, to ask, where would you see the need for, at least my experience has been that most measurements that you do that are more of a gathering notions about, like we talked about early on in the beginning of the Lmap effort, is that there are several different use cases. And certainly two are real-time diagnostics. My network is slow. Can you figure out what the problem is? That purely doesn't fit your model. The second one is let's figure out how good our national networks are, how that has changed compared to last year, or is the North better than the South, type of thing. So much more long-term. But the latter, which seems somewhat closer to what you're looking at, is the methodology generally is worked out over long time periods. Well, it has to mature, it's valid, it's reflective of real operational consideration, it works for different technologies. Everybody, most people agree that that actually measures something useful and is indicative of whatever policy objectives you have. But those are not done in real time. I mean, those metrics are established in documents that are published, and this is a process closer to what's happening right now in this building as opposed to what's happening at an operator in a minute by minute, incident by incident basis. It's not quite clear to me that for the latter, that having a protocol as opposed to a precise definition, maybe using the Yang data model or whatever, so that everybody can indeed replicate exactly the same behavior without writing it in a Word file, seems quite useful. But it's not a protocol in the traditional sense, as in as a request, as a response, as an error message, that type of thing. So if you could elaborate a little bit, I think that would help me at least understand better where you're trying to go.
My name is Mukam. My question is related to your need for, in your diagram, you showed collaboration between the probes and not just the controller. Do you not think that that has scalability implications? And going back to some of what the last speaker was speaking about, particularly from the perspective of the regulators, if it's possible for the regulators to pull information from the controller in some standardized form, would that not solve the problem you're trying to address?
Actually, I didn't get your question. You mean?
First question, in your model for how to do scalability, you show where a probe is speaking simultaneously to multiple controllers, which is currently not what the working group is heading towards. I'm asking, isn't that going to sabotage the future scalability of the system? And then secondly, for the regulatory need, because you're saying you want the regulator to be able to use probes that are already in place. What if the regulator could pull information from existing controllers in some standardized form? Would that not solve the problem you have?
Okay, I haven't considered in details about the solution or something like this, but we just there's some issues here, so maybe we can talk it later or something.
Dan Romashkano speaking as a contributor. So I see there are like two problems. I'm trying to understand here what are like the new problems, because there are somehow it looks to me like we have a scalability problem, which is the issue of very large dimension networks, and we'd like to understand whether this is beyond what we initially anticipated, because large was like the first word in our chart. So there may be something that is not sufficient in our current architecture. So that, for example, it doesn't meet the needs of a country like China, or maybe we missed something in our design that didn't meet our initial requirement. But, and I'm trying to separate the problem from the solution, because the solution indeed, previous speaker put it very well. Actually, having multiple controllers configure the same probe does not solve, but it actually makes more complex the issue of scalability. Because what is kind of designed as from an information flow, from the configuration flow as a tree, now suddenly becomes as a mesh, to speak, that we need to now solve issues of authority and interlocking of managers, which by design we try to avoid, to make the solution simple and more scalable. So I'd like to put that I said and understand whether we missed something in the original requirement is large. The second problem that is saying is something that we by design put aside. And this is the issue of multiple domains. So when we are saying multiple ISPs, actually we discussed that issue. We understood that it's a more complex issue. And yes, now speaking as a contributor, I believe that when we are done with the first phase of Lmap, and actually it's time to start discussing about the multiple domains problem in the inter-domain communication. And inter-domain communication opens actually the path to speak about synchronization of data, about correlation, all the things that we talked about. But again, what I would like to see probably is kind of more concrete problem statement. And it's a good discussion to start now, and because actually I think without anticipating start talking about the possible rechartering by the next IETF if we actually make good progress with the current condition of the current charter.
Frode Sorensen from the Norwegian regulator. I'm also chairing European working group looking into a collaborative system among regulators. So I just want to say thank you for an interesting presentation and express an interest in the scenario. I'm not sure about the solution yet. We in the European project are at the very early stage. So we haven't discussed the details of our architecture yet. So whether hierarchical architecture is suitable or if this can be solved as a kind of data collection analysis aspect, we haven't decided yet, but I just wanted to say we're interested in this scenario, and in case we are going to follow it up, we can consider to contribute to this RFC or whatever it will be in the future.
Okay, great.
Al Morton. So I think what you're proposing is for the next phase of Lmap work. I think that's exactly what Dan was alluding to there a bit, and that's because the charter says that a key assumption of this initial work, and that's the terminology we ended up using in the framework. This is the initial phase of work for Lmap. Is that the measurement system is under the control of a single organization. So this really looks over the edge into what may be necessary, but I don't think we've done anything wrong so far in terms of covering the what is large scale. I think that what I've found in talking to people is that large measurement systems are bigger than the ones you're currently using, and that answer is different, unfortunately, for everybody. But I think right. But I think we've so far in the documents we've published, we've had kind of the philosophy that if we keep things as simple as possible, then they will scale. We don't have an exact scale evaluation criteria here, but we're trying to follow that mantra. So I think we will be in decent enough shape and be able to take on another phase of work, something similar to this collaborative phase that you described.
Matt Nathis. I was principal investigator on an NSF proposal almost 20 years ago to build a thing called National Internet Measurement Infrastructure. This was in the university research and education community. And one of the things that we ran into that bit us a lot harder than we expected, it's probably not a problem in your specific case, but it's a problem in the general case, is the lack of good authentication, good way of delegating authentication and authorization. And your case has the property that there's a certain amount of symmetry in a closed set of participants. But in a university environment where you have regional networks and departments and all sorts of stuff, the analogous problem failed to converge. This is putting the cart before the horse. I actually completely agree with the statements that we're peering over the fence at the next phase, and we need to think very, very carefully about what the question is before we propose answers. But this is really cool work. It's a good start. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So let me add now my comment. Romashkan now speaking as chair. So it seems to me that first of all there is quite a level of interest. Either some. So, just by curiosity, how many people have read the internet draft, any of the first 5 versions? Okay, so there are like more than 5, less than 10 hands up. Not bad, however. So I really suggest that you read and comment this, having in mind that this is beyond the scope of the first phase. we are really focusing the effort in the next cycle. Next cycle being between now going through the interim meeting protocol decision and then after we adopt the protocol to kind of make progress with the protocol. But we may start discussing as the next IETF a possible rechartering, which of course will go to the ISG and may or may not be approved. But with the objective in mind that we are defining and looking at use cases that can be within the scope of a rechartering also working group, please read and comment and also suggest other items. Actually, we have a next presentation also about the possible such other item. So that would be my recommendation. And yeah, good work and thank you. And
thank you.
Let progresses.
So if you have any comments,
yeah, comments
send it to the main list.
Comments to the list so that this can be improved and focused better.
Right.
And come as a better shape when time comes for the real discussion. Okay, one more point in the agenda. Now meet echo gain. Okay, so who is remotely presenting? So it's code 16.
Yes, Antonio Bobo speaking. Can you hear
Hello.
me?
Yes, we can hear
Hello?
you loud and clear. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Antonio Bobo and belong to the IEEE 802.16.3 workgroup. Thanks for this opportunity to present such connection, such possible connection with Lmap. So next slide, please. So during this presentation, I'm going to update IETF Lmap workgroup regarding the status of our project 802.16.3. And I'm going to give an overview of our scope and highlighting some commonalities and differences with respect to Lmap, because there are several ones, several points in common, and a few points that are different and could be discussed, and some hints even about how our work, our architectural requirements document might be used to supplement current Lmap. And the references to this document are in the slide below. Next slide, please. So let's start about an overview about this project. The main purpose of this project is characterizing the performance of deployed mobile broadband networks from a user perspective. And I highlight in this statement the word mobile, because exactly this is the main focus, as we will discuss even later, of this project. And this is done by means of metrics and test procedures, and as well communication protocols and data formats, allowing network-based server to coordinate and manage test operation and data collection. So basically, there are commonalities in finding the most suitable communication protocol, a suitable data format, and the references to metrics that are good to represent the performances and the user experience about performances in the experience in the network. And the third bullet is collecting such information from a disparate set of devices in the network. So the idea is to get this information from the end users directly, so from the devices directly. What are the potential stakeholders of such measurements? We have identified several stakeholders potentially that are not only network operators or regulators, but even the users of the mobile networks themselves, the corporate users that are specific users, and even policymakers, researchers, and others more that are detailed in the next slide. Some key similarities with Lmap from our point of view are the end user perspective in the measurement, the inclusion of the metrics in the scope, the inclusion even of protocol details of proposals for that in the scope, and the coordination of the measurements done by an entity that is not necessarily part of the network under test, the controller, let's say. What is a little bit different respect to Lmap? The focus on IEEE project is specifically and strictly on mobile. And there are, as I said before, several measurement stakeholders identified, and the measurement devices identified are the plurality of the different devices that can be attached to the network. Next slide, please. So this hello. This table is a presentation of a number of stakeholders and a number of use cases. In the columns, there are the different stakeholders. In the rows, there are some use cases that we have identified as possible ones. As examples, okay, governmental, policymaker, but even users, individual or corporate, cell tower operators, wireless carrier and network operators, but even researchers, standards developer, network equipment manufacturers, application developer, and mobile application service providers are potential stakeholders. And about which are the use cases that can be there in the network. Okay, the quality of experience experienced on a set of networks available to the end users is specifically one use case that is important for a number of these stakeholders. And if we focus on a specific network, it is a subset, let's say. But even identifying a limitation in deploying of the specific network is a potential use case, because there can be some obstacles to deploy a specific network, for example, because there is the need of further cell towers, but there is no option to add in a specific scenario such additional radio capacity. So there could be some stakeholders that are interested in understanding such obstacles, such limitations. Another use case can be the monitoring of changes in operation of the network. The network can be overloaded, can be out of order, and even this use case is specifically important for some of these stakeholders. The traditional troubleshooting problems in a specific network is another use case, but even improving the knowledge of system performances can be useful. For example, for the wireless carriers, but even for researchers that are doing some modeling, for example, of the performances. Even lead the market toward more effective networks could be of some interest, for example, for application service providers, because a specific service is effective only if the network is supporting with a specific throughput and the bandwidth. And this, for example, could move from a legacy network to the LTE or to the 5G and so on. Or encourage the deployment of the spectrum using such specific technologies and implementation, another use case, or compare the performances data to the simulated results that can be useful for researchers or for standards developers, to assess even theoretical models and to assess that there are some technology elements proposed by the standards are effectively supporting in the terms that they have been designed. So all of them, all these use cases are mapped to such kind of stakeholders in the sort of matrix that is available in and commented even the architecture document. Next slide, please. So we have identified such commonalities between 802.16.3 and Lmap. Both focus on the performance, measuring the performance of the broadband services with end user perspective. Both include a measurement agent concept embedded either in the client or in the server. But in Lmap, there is also the concept of the measurement peer that is marked out of scope, while in 802.16.3, the client includes both the measurement agent and the measurement peer with the terminology of the Lmap. Controller and collector are logical entities that have similar roles and modeling in both the scenarios, in both the projects, and the reference to the IPPM workgroup for the metrics is present in both the workgroups. The idea to present and define the protocol for communication among the different entities is present in both the workgroups, and obviously details are different so far, but there can be some some similarities in the concept. And both the workgroups consider security because it is important on both sides. Next slide, please. What is a little bit different? What could be some supplement to Lmap? The focus on mobile, in our opinion, is something that could be important to capture and to highlight. Here there is a list of specific conditions, specific elements that are related to the mobile, because a user can experience different network technologies at the same time, even during the same connection. If we are, for example, in a ServUCC scenario, or the user can connect even with multiple operators and even with virtual operators as well. The user can experience different radio conditions that impact a lot on the services themselves. There is a need to manage the measurements even statistically to draw generalized conclusion. And in our opinion, there is a need even to correlate measurement to some metadata, some dimension that are meaningful from a mobile perspective. For example, location, but even the radio access technology or the cell that the user is experiencing, and or even the cell path that the user is experiencing. There can be even triggers based on specific location, trigger on measurements. And in case of active testing, the idea is to take care about the limitation in traffic and in battery consumption to avoid problems to the end user itself. And last but not least, the many mobile devices, the platform of many mobile devices is closed or relatively closed, so we have to to deal with this in proposing some measurements on top of the end devices. Another aspect is, as discussed in the previous slide, the inclusion of several use cases. One example more could be the enterprise use case, where an organization, corporate, can adopt a private server to collect measurements and the private data collector to collect measurements in order to have its own measurement and compare this measurement to the SLA, for example, that the provider is giving. And finally, the protocol definition that we have done some protocol definition more in terms of workflow and semantical data, and this could be of some use to find possible hints or use even on the Lmap side. Next slide, please. These two slides are showing an example of a workflow about how the IPPM TWMP, that is a two-way active measurement protocol, can be encapsulated over such workflow from 802.16.3. So basically, the entities are the end device, that is even the control client session sender from the TWMP perspective. And there is the controller that has a similar role than in Lmap, and the server that is the end, that is the host, that is the peer measurement side for the session reflector and the server itself collocated. So after registration phase and the configuration phase, there is the TWAMP session request and accept. Then the end user device is communicating the start of the measurement to the controller, and then the TWMP flow can proceed with the testing packets that are sent back and forth to measure, for example, round trip time as one of the possible measurements. Next slide, please. So after a while, the end user device has performed the measurement of the round trip time, for example, using this TWMP protocol, and is communicating, notifying the need to upload the measurement to the data collector, that notify as well to the controller that the upload is completed. Finally, the controller is involved with the end user device in stopping the measurement, and even the TWMP session is stopped as well. This is an example of how the TWMP IPPM can be encapsulated over this workflow. And the idea is only to give an example of the possible sequence of procedures that can be involved from the 802.16.3 perspective. So, last slide. So the proposed way forward is to have 802.16.3 participants and other volunteers to bring contribution to Lmap in the intention to expand the applicability of the Lmap information model and protocols toward the mobile broadband application in accordance even with the project 802.16.3 focus. Thank you for attention.
And thank you for the contribution. Questions and comments, please.
Mike Ackerman, thanks for a great presentation, really good information. My question is, in the realm of active versus passive, does your framework accommodate both?
Yes. The idea is to support with the architecture both active and passive. In case of active, the architecture is including a measurement server that can be a public measurement server or a private measurement server, depending on the scenario, because if the scenario is the corporate enterprise scenario, there will be a private measurement server and a private data collector to have the end user device connecting to performing the measurement in active mode and then collecting the results.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. One more question. You listed a couple different challenges for merging efforts with IETF. Can you say what you think is the #1 challenge to allowing that to happen?
I'm not sure I got your question. So you're asking the challenge about what?
The possibility of merging your efforts with those of IETF and Lmap. What do you see as the biggest barrier to allowing that to occur?
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. Okay, now I'm talking personally because there are even other members of the work group, and so I'm talking on my side only for this. But I think that I think that all of us agree that the focus on mobile is the major contribution, and giving this specific supplement about mobile that could be, for example, paying attention to all the aspects regarding the changing radio condition and the changing radio technology and the impact on the measurements, so to take care that these aspects are considered and are not prevented from the architecture, even in Lmap. This could be important. I don't see, personally, I don't see barriers to merge the two groups technically. The point could be, from a point of view, in some points, clarifying that there could be different aspects related exactly to mobile or to specific stakeholders involved in the measurement process.
Okay, interesting. I just wanted to follow up on your last comments. Having had some experience with mobile measurements, there seem to be two types of things that are generally relevant, and I think it would be very helpful to have your more detailed contribution, you personally or as a project, detailed contribution as to the kind of parameters that are most useful. The obvious ones that you alluded to, namely geographic location, signal strength, identity of the cell tower, and so on, very similar to what currently the Mobile Measurement Broadband America project is gathering. There seem to be, and this is probably generally true, two types of parameters, namely ones which are relatively static, such as the vendor of a mobile device. So how do I know what that is particularly when the measurements are not done by the operator, who may know whoever means that. But that doesn't change measurement by measurement, but it can have a significant effect on performance. Low-end devices, for example, may not be able to actually fill an LTE channel just because they can't generate or receive data fast enough. And secondly, the more dynamic parameters. So I think it would be very helpful if you could, based on your discussion, summarize in detail, not just at a bullet point, high-level level that you were able to do here, what those parameters would be and would they fit into the data model. And is the data model the right place to stick those, or should that be an out-of-band mechanism that is outside the core Lmap context? But primarily, Is that true for the dynamic one? Is it true for the static pieces as well?
Yes, I agree. I agree that there are such kind of different set of parameters that are exactly can be divided exactly in static and dynamic. I agree. Static regarding the topology of the network and the basic information about the end device and the technology of the radio access network, and dynamically related to the different radio condition that the user is experiencing during its service, or related even to the different, let's say, mobility condition that the user is experiencing, because it can be indoor, it can be out, it can connect to femto, it can connect to macro cells and so on. So there is a number of different possible scenarios that are, let's say, important to capture, because if mobility is exactly the great differentiator for such kind of services.
Jürgen Schönwelder, I'm having first a question channeling Trevor, and he asks essentially what the status is. Do you have a concrete protocol that you're using, or is the exchange that you showed on the slide more conceptual and architectural at this point in time? You still have to work out the protocol.
Thanks for the question. The protocol is sketched in the architectural requirements document as a workflow, and the specific procedures are listed with a number of informational elements that are considered important from the semantic point of view. There are even some other documents that are working documents, not final documents, drafts, that are related to the peers' behaviors about such protocol, and some kind of information of data model that can be useful more in terms of the semantical point of view that from the point of view of the syntactical. But okay, we are not at the final stage, we are in progress, let's say, but there could be, I think, some hints that can be supplement in case even for Lmap, I think.
Thank you. I have my own question that I would like to ask concerning our information model. I tried to map what you had on your slides and trying to figure out to what extent that might impact our information model. I spotted one thing, namely in one bullet you said you want to be able to bind the execution of measurements to certain events, such as coming into a certain area or a certain region, which is something we currently don't really have in our model. That's something we have to look at probably. But there might be more that I didn't spot right away. So it would be really helpful if you or one in the group, whoever, can actually go through the information model with an eye on seeing whether there's anything that is missing in order to support mobile measurement. That would be
okay, that's fine.
Barbara Stark. My biggest concern is I really would not like to have anything that impacts the current Lmap schedules. The Lmap information model, the Lmap framework, and all that stuff need to continue to go forward. You know, and kind of consistent with Jürgen's, I think that if 802.16.3 participants have comments, they should bring them forward. There is no reason that I can imagine why they could not participate directly on Lmap lists as individual contributors and provide their comments directly in that manner. There's, you know, no need for liaisons back and forth. But let's not do anything to impact the Lmap schedules.
Okay, So let me shortly address this, and this is Dan Mashkan. So speaking also from the perspective of the IETF liaison to IEEE, and I have been following this work actually pretty close, and have also some discussions with Roger Marks, who is chairing this project, and um, I know some of the details. Actually, we are right now in a phase where we're going to complete the first phase of Lmap, and I fully agree with what Barbara said, that it would probably be very late and very perturbating to bring now like additional requirements or architectural changes. Although I should say this may not be that consistent. But still, I would actually start by encouraging the participants in NATO 2.16.3 to start by writing documents similar to the ones that you have seen for collaborative use cases, actually writing something like mobile Lmap use case document, which basically, in my opinion, should kind of focus on what these two slides say actually. Commonalities between 16.3 and Lmap, and the possible based enhancements. Now, actually, if I'm looking at these enhancements, I don't see actually anything that is ground shaking. Maybe the one thing is, but actually this shows also in the collaborative Lmap, is the issue of multiple controllers, which we kind of made a decision, an architectural decision, that for the first phase we are not going to deal with this. We need to understand the use cases and the implication for a future dealing with this problem. Its information model also seems that most of the pieces are can be reused. Probably the location piece is missing, but this is probably an incremental addition that can be brought without too much perturbating the existing model. For the rest, so the next two slides actually show Lmap running over a transport, which happens to be 2.16. And really, I believe that is a task of the .16 folks to know the details, to follow up what is happening from the point of view of adoption of protocol, and see if any problem arose, maybe even try to work with the proponent of the two solutions to run kind of an experiment that runs the REST-based protocol or REST-conf over 8.16.3. I don't expect any problems, but you know, testing is always good to confirm assumptions. Okay, but
Barbara Stark, one more thing I wanted to mention about, I guess it gets to some of Henning's and some of the other comments. There was a discussion early on in Lmap about these things called, I guess, sort of service attributes, sort of the environmental conditions under which tests got run. And we kind of, there was this, I guess, decision to not include that in the IETF Lmap information model, which is why in Broadband Forum, TR 304, which was published, they actually published environmental and service attribute, I guess, parameters, which would be used to extend a data model. And they published them there because it was felt the expertise for defining those elements existed there as opposed to here, because those were kind of specific to that sort of environment, the DSL and the PON sort of environment. And so that's another thing to consider, is that they may be able to simply identify their own extensions around service attributes.
Henning, speaking, the quick question: do they feel, my sense culturally, that the broadband forum tends to be copper and glass as opposed to wireless? they worry about location, cell towers?
Right, that was not there in the broadband forum. I was merely suggesting that 802.16.3 might consider, since they have the expertise in understanding those things, producing their list of those things, because in our previous discussion, we were kind of discouraged from bringing that into IETF.
So but what seems to make sense is to have an extension point that's clear where insert environment here type of thing. And so the data model.
And I think that was there at one time, if Trevor's still on or
I
something.
don't remember. I looked at it or look at it so that we point these arrows to say, here's where you should fit in.
Yeah, and I think it was there at one time, but I haven't looked myself either, so I'll look as well.
I am still on. So what we had is we said all those service attributes, if they exist in the device that has the measurement agent on it, we can just run a measurement or collection task on the MA as part of the Lmap framework to gather those and give them back in a report. If they don't exist on the device that supports the MA, then they can be spliced in after the data collection.
Can you say that again? The volume on your voice was low at first, but it is higher now.
Okay. What we said is those service attributes, if they exist on the device that runs the MA, so if they exist, for example, on the DSL gateway, then what we'd simply do in Lmap is there would be a measurement task, and that measurement task would simply be a sort of data collection task that would collect those attributes from the device and report it back in the report. Or indeed, if we run a throughput test, there's nothing stopping that throughput test as well as reporting the, say, TCP throughput on the line. It can also report those results. It can fetch them from whatever data model exists in that MA device and report them. If those attributes don't exist in the device, of course, we can always enhance the measurement data at the collection or subsequent to the collection point with those line service attributes as well.
If I could translate Henning's face, I think maybe it would be useful if there were some clarification or description of how to do this in the information model draft.
When what I heard
Probably more
was
stated in the framework, but yeah, we'll check it again.
Yeah, so what I heard was, and these are really two somewhat separate ways of doing it. One is essentially you initiate a measurement approach task, which basically just says, tell me who you are, what you're doing, who made you, and all of that. And so the measurement result that gets returned is just that. And the second one, which presumably is more relevant for dynamic measurements, where some of that information, such as location, may well change during the measurement, would be to have that be more closely embedded in the measurement result. Simply because I may need to know at the end of a measurement, was I in the same place as I when I started it, because I may have just been measuring the throughput on the Acela train as opposed to standing in the station. Knowing the difference matters.
Yep, exactly. Both of those are perfectly valid. It depends on your implementation of the tasks.
Okay, so thank you very much. So concluding, I would encourage the .16 team to write, it should not be very large, but a short internet draft on the mobile use case, without entering necessarily in all the details, but more like showing what would be the incremental work that needs to be covered by Lmap. And same as with the collaborative use case, we'll discuss those two internet drafts by IETF 93 as a starting point for a possible rechartering of Lmap that we will be asking from the ISG, assuming that are making progress with our protocol work, which will have some encouraging indications in the last weeks and in the meeting today. Any other comments? Benoit, AD, last words.
Benoit, so you've been doing a good job to summarize this. So for the last two presentations, it's true that we had like the initial phase in the charter. We've been thinking about, you know, multiple domain, etc. And as you said, we start to see the light now in terms of producing documents, bringing a Yang model, etc. So you're doing the right thing. I mean, the next thing is to focus on the use cases and not like, maybe not like we've seen in the previous presentation, like on the solution, because the solution might be completely different depending on the specific use case that we want to have. We want to have like sharing the controller information, and we want to control multiple images, etc. Let's not go there now. Just the use case is the right thing.
And a mobile solution certainly should work with .16, but it work also with other mobile technologies. So that's something that the working group will need to consider. Last thing, I will send a doodle poll to the group for a meeting. Sometimes second week, I'll provide dates for the second week of May and third week of May. So people will be able to express their preferences, and we'll choose a date that makes the minimal number of people unhappy. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jürgen, for Jabber, Marius, and Barbara for taking notes. Please send us the notes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys on the Jabber, on the internet. Blue sheet. We need a second blue sheet. Where is the second blue sheet?